Hello everyone and welcome to week 9 of our English composition class. It might be hard for you to believe, but it's hard for me to believe that we only have 3 weeks left of the class. Week 9, week 10, and week 11. You're going to be working on the final draft of your research paper this week and submitting it by Sunday. And then the last 2 weeks are focused on narrative. It's a little bit lighter workload. And this week is really going to be a daunting week perhaps to get that final draft done, but then just know that the next couple weeks are a little more relaxed and we get into narrative, which I say is a little bit of a lighter load. But this week you're working on your research paper, your research assignment. You're going to be advocating for a change in the school system. There's a number of interesting topics that I've read about in the discussions, and I'm excited to see your final drafts. I just wanted to spend this recording quickly going through a checklist for your paper and then looking at a works cited page, or some people refer to it as a bibliography. I just want to make sure you know how to do that, because different than our other papers, there's one required for this one. So first, let's go through the research paper checklist. 1, you want to start with an engaging introduction. So when you're putting your paper together, just take a look at what strategy you're using for that introduction to the topic. There's a lot of interesting strategies to use. When I was writing a lot of research papers, I actually left the introduction generally for the end, because it's a place to think outside of the box. I would build the supporting paragraphs first and the thesis, and then kind of do the introduction and conclusion at the end. So for introduction strategies, you can focus on a current news story. You could focus on a school, perhaps, that's already doing what you're advocating. That's a great way to introduce your topic. You could look at a startling statistic or a fact. You could ask a rhetorical question, use a quote by another author, or even a personal narrative. If you're going to do personal narrative, keep the I statements only to the introduction. Don't use them in the supporting paragraphs. But those are all great introduction strategies. You want it to grab the reader's attention. You want it to introduce this topic, and you want to get the reader thinking about what you're going to be discussing. Secondly, the thesis, the thesis statement. We've been working on them all semester. Thesis statements have some primary goals. They want to introduce the topic of the essay. They want to provide a clear idea about the writer's stance, what the writer wants to address about the topic. And in the third part, which I always try to advocate for, is use that thesis statement to preview your supporting paragraph. So for example, let's say I'm going to be writing a paper about the benefits of healthy lunches, and I'm advocating for schools to use healthy lunches. And furthermore, I want schools to get local food into their lunch program. I'm going to identify that in my thesis statement. I'm going to make it clear that I'm advocating for good food and local food. And finally, I might talk about the benefits of that change in schools, that kids can learn where their food comes from. They'll get a better idea of the food chain, and finally they're going to be eating better food, which will make healthier bodies, healthier minds, a healthier student all around. So I might preview those topics in my thesis statement. Now I know this is a lot to do in one sentence. A thesis statement can be 1 or 2 sentences, and you want it to be at the end of that first paragraph, at the end of your engaging introduction. You want to use sources, so you're going to be using paraphrases, summaries, or direct quotes, and you want to make sure those sources use signal phrases. Signal phrases are an introduction to the source. It usually includes the author of the source, the title of the publication if it's from a journal or a newspaper, and finally the credentials of the source itself, the author. You want to make sure you're using sources in a variety of ways. A lot of people use sources to support their ideas. You can use sources to introduce a topic. You can use sources to argue against. That's one I don't see often, but I think it's a great use of a source, to bring in a quote that you actually disagree with and you want to argue against that. Finally, you want to make sure your sources are properly cited, that you're using the correct author, the correct source publication, and finally that you're using a verb that points the reader towards what we should be doing with the source. So if the writer is passionately saying something, you might say argues. If the writer is divulging something, you might use the verb admit. You can use says or states as well, but it's good to mix those up and have fun with it. Finally, look at the Unity chapter in our Models for Writers book. I think there's a lot of good information there about just making sure everything in your paper needs to be there and has a purpose for being there and moves the argument along. Alright, so that's what I got for my research paper checklist. One more thing I quickly wanted to show you is this, the Works Cited page over here. This is from your textbook, Models for Writers. We're doing an MLA style research paper, so you're going to be using MLA guidelines. And there are just a few rules to remember. One, you want to make the Works Cited page a separate page. Don't just put this at the bottom under the final paragraph. Make it a whole separate page. Title it Works Cited. There's some minor tab spacing things you need to consider. That the first line of each source is going to be at the margin, and then the second line and third line is going to be indented 5 spaces. There's an order in particular for the information. You can look at that in the book. I'm not going to go through that. If you got sources from EBSCOhost, I know ProQuest was an issue, but if you got sources from EBSCOhost, you can actually go back to that source in EBSCOhost, and there should be a little button you can press for the MLA citation. That'll print it up for you perfectly. You want to put them in alphabetical order. So if there's authors, you're going to be using the author's last name. And then if you don't have an author for a source, it might just be a report by a group. You use the title of the group. This is one from Cone Communications, but above here we have David Bijou, an author. This one also has the title of an article because there's not a group identified. But you want to make sure those are in alphabetical order. And then, like I say, there's some information in each of these, whether it's a video, here we got a YouTube clip, or a newspaper. This is from the Wall Street Journal. There's just some minor tweaks you need to do depending on what the source is. So make sure to look at the book Models for Writers for that information. You can also find that at OWL Purdue, which is a great resource for writing. If you just Google MLA OWL Purdue citations, you'll find some information there as well. Alright, that's what I got for you. I'm excited for you to get your work done this week on your research paper and submit it by Sunday. That's the only assignment for this week. There's no other assignment other than polishing that final draft. I'll be getting you feedback on your rough draft in the next few days, so look for that. You can use that if you'd like to structure the final draft. I wish you the best of luck. Like I said, I know this is a big assignment, but this is the major assignment of the class. And following this, we have a couple more things left, and we will wrap this unforgettable summer semester up. Alright, take care everybody, and I'll be seeing you next week.